Captain Jason Harper stood at the center of the council chamber, his hands steady despite the weight of the moment. He wasn't just representing Earth today. He was carrying the hopes of his species, the last remnants of their dream of peace. A dream that, with every passing day in the galaxy, felt more and more fragile. The council room was filled with representatives from a dozen species, each seated at long, crescent-shaped tables, each one more alien than the last. The ceiling arched high above them, a holographic display of the galaxy rotating in the center. Harper could feel the eyes of the assembly on him as he spoke. "Humanity stands ready to offer aid," he said, his voice firm, not just in words, but in deeds. "We are a young species, yes, but we have known war, we have known loss, and we know what it means to fight for survival. We offer our strength, our resources, and our knowledge to protect every peaceful world under the shadow of the Azilok threat." Across from him, Shara, the sleek, ethereal ambassador of the Elysians, raised an elegant brow. "Your strength, Captain Harper, is admirable. But let us not forget, violence breeds violence. The galaxy cannot continue to tear itself apart." Harper clenched his jaw, but remained calm. The Elysians were famous for their pacifism, sophisticated, highly intelligent, but wholly unprepared for the kind of galactic war that was looming. Their world had been a paradise, untouched by conflict, and they often regarded humanity's combative nature as primitive. Harper glanced toward General Thomas Sinclair, who stood by the side of the room, his arms crossed, his face a mask of stoic resolve. Sinclair had fought on Earth's front lines during the Droxian conflict, one of the bloodiest wars humanity had ever known. His military experience was vast, and even now, with the Axilok invasion on the horizon, he said nothing, choosing to let Harper navigate this delicate moment. Harper took a breath and continued. "Peace is worth striving for, Ambassador Shara, but we must protect those who wish to live in peace. We will not sit idle while the Axilok burn entire worlds." His words echoed in the room. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. Harper knew, deep down, that the road ahead would demand more than just words of peace. It would demand action, and soon. After the meeting, Harper returned to the human delegation's quarters, a sleek, minimalist space at the edge of the council complex. He hadn't expected any easy victories today, but the skepticism in the room had shaken him. The Elysians were right, he had to admit. Violence did breed violence, but sometimes the universe didn't give you the luxury of idealism. He slumped into a chair, rubbing his temples. General Thomas Sinclair entered a moment later, closing the door behind him with a soft click. There was no need for pleasantries between the two of them. Sinclair had seen the same thing Harper had. The tension in the room, the glares from the other delegates. "That was a hell of a speech, Captain," Sinclair said, leaning against the doorframe. His gravelly voice was laced with dry humor, but there was a sharpness in his eyes. "But I saw the same thing you did. They don't get it. None of them do." Harper leaned forward, his fingers brushing the edges of the table. "The Axilok are real. They're coming. And we can't just keep playing nice and hoping for the best. We have to prepare for war." Sinclair exhaled sharply, walking over to the viewport and staring out at the endless stars beyond. "You think you understand what that means, don't you? What it takes to fight for your survival." He paused, his voice lowering. "You've seen what it's like here in the Council. A galaxy of peaceful civilizations, fragile utopias that have no idea what it's like to live on a death world." Harper's brow furrowed. Deathworlds. Sinclair turned, his face hardening. Places like Earth, where everything that walks, crawls, or flies can kill you. Where the air, The water, the ground itself, is hostile. We're not like them. We're survivors. We fight, or we die. Harper felt a flicker of discomfort at the weight of Sinclair's words. He had always believed in peace in diplomacy. But the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. He wasn't prepared for the kind of galaxy that awaited humanity. "Do you think I'm ready for that, General?" Harper asked quietly. Sinclair met his eyes, his expression unreadable. "You will be, or the galaxy will teach you." Harper sat in the command chair aboard the Aegis Earth's newly commissioned flagship, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. The Axilok threat had been growing for weeks, subtle, like a dark cloud gathering at the edge of the known universe. But now it was here. The hive mind had struck without warning, and the Council was still bickering over whether to call it an invasion or a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, entire colonies on the fringes of human space were burning. He looked across the room at General Sinclair, whose hard eyes never left the data feeds streaming across the screens. "They've breached Argon X," Harper said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We've lost contact with the planet's defenses. We need to move. Now." Sinclair didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted to the Council's latest transmission. He could see the same people Harper had argued with in the chambers: Shara, the Elysian diplomat, and Kalar, the Coran ambassador, still reciting theories of galactic misunderstanding and a peaceful resolution. But Sinclair wasn't interested in diplomatic niceties. "The Council's not going to act fast enough, Jason," he said, his voice blunt. "By the time they reach a decision, Argon X will be a crater." Harper clenched his jaw. He knew Sinclair was right, but the thought of acting without the Council's approval gnawed at him. They had to be united, didn't they? The idea of acting unilaterally, of abandoning diplomacy entirely, felt like betrayal. He wanted to believe in the system, in the idea that there was always another way. But then the transmission cut off again. Another report came in. The Axilok were using their hive mind coordination to overwhelm Argon X's defenses. The humans, with their superior tactics and experience in guerrilla warfare, were their only hope. Sinclair looked Harper in the eye, his voice soft but unyielding. "Jason, it's time to stop talking." With a heavy sigh, Harper gave the order. "Prepare the fleet for deployment. We're going in." The Aegis engines roared to life, and humanity, for the first time, was going to fight, not for peace, but for survival. The battle for Argon X was everything Harper had feared. Humanity had thrown everything they had into the fight. The Aegis's weapons, along with the Vrok's warships, pounded the Axilok's forward positions from orbit. But the Axilok were relentless. Their insectoid bodies and hive-mind tactics made them nearly impossible to outmaneuver, and no matter how much firepower the humans unleashed, there were always more Axilok crawling out of the ruins to take their place. Harper stood on the bridge of the Aegis, staring out at the chaos unfolding below. Ground forces, led by Colonel Megan Westbrook, were making progress, but the cost was staggering. Every human soldier knew that Axilok would fight until every last one of them was dead. The casualty reports kept coming in. Casualties are expected to exceed 50% in some sectors. And yet, the humans pushed on. "Captain, we've secured the western perimeter, but we've lost contact with the 2nd Battalion." Westbrook's voice came through the comms, tight with urgency. "We need reinforcements on the ground, or we lose the entire sector." Harper rubbed his temples. "Hold position. We'll send another wave. You're not alone down there." Sinclair's voice interrupted. "You're wasting time, Jason. Every second you hesitate, the Axilok get closer to taking the planet." Harper turned toward the general, who stood in the shadows of the bridge, his arms crossed. "What do you suggest? We drop everything and call for another evacuation. Is that the human way, Sinclair?" The general stepped forward, his voice steady but hard. "The human way, Captain, is to survive. You're still trying to negotiate with the Council in your mind, but they've already left you hanging. They'll never send enough reinforcements. It's on us now." Harper's fists clenched. He could feel the weight of the decision crushing him. If they kept fighting, they would win, but at what cost? He turned back to the viewport. "We fight to win," he muttered to himself. And with that, humanity's future in the galaxy was no longer about diplomacy. It was about survival. The war against that Exilok was dragging humanity deeper into the abyss. The Aegis had made its first successful strike on a major Exilok nest, but the relief was short-lived. Every battle had its cost. Every victory came with a mountain of casualties. The fleet had been shattered, and the human colonies on the edge of space were collapsing under the weight of continuous Exilok assaults. In the aftermath of the first decisive strike, Harper sat in his private quarters, reviewing battle reports. His fingers hovered over the holographic table, but he couldn't focus. His mind kept returning to the images of the fallen soldiers, the faces of men and women he'd known, now lost forever. A sharp knock broke through his thoughts. "Come in," he said, his voice hollow. The door slid open to reveal General Sinclair, his uniform streaked with grime, his face grim. The old soldier didn't bother with pleasantries. "We've got a problem," Sinclair said, handing over a data pad. "The Vrock want more. They're demanding command over the next offensive. They've made it clear they won't fight unless we let them take the lead." Harper swiped the pad, scanning the data. The Vrock, once helpful allies, had now grown bolder, using the war to increase their power. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about who would control the galaxy after the dust settled. "We can't let them take control of the war effort," Harper muttered, his hand tightening around the datapad. "Not now." Sinclair's eyes hardened. "That's not all. The Kaldar are pulling back from the front lines. They claim humanity's tactics are too brutal. Some of the other species are starting to question our methods. They're scared, Jason, and they're blaming us." Harper stood, pacing the small room. The political fallout from the war was beginning to bite. The other species of the Council were turning on humanity, accusing them of provoking the Tylok by acting too aggressively. He could feel the pressure building, the weight of his decisions threatening to crush him. "We've pushed them too far," Harper said quietly, almost to himself. "We've pushed everyone too far," Sinclair replied, his voice low. "Now we either finish this, or we lose everything." Harper's gaze hardened. There was no turning back now. The galaxy was never going to forgive them, and peace was a distant dream. It was time for humanity to embrace the hard truth. The war was no longer about diplomacy. It was about victory, and to win, they had to fight like the Deathworlders they had become. The Aegis hurtled through space, its hull scarred from the battle at Argonix. The fleet was battered, its ranks thinning with every skirmish, but the war had taken on a brutal momentum of its own. Every day that Exilok pressed harder, every day humanity had to fight harder to hold ground. But what weighed most heavily on Captain Harper's mind wasn't the loss of soldiers or ships. It was the cost of their actions. The price humanity was paying for victory. "We've lost contact with Drox Prime," came the report from Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, her voice tight with concern. Harper looked up from his console. "How bad?" he asked. It's bad, sir," Mitchell continued. "Psylocke forces hit the capital city this morning. The Coram garrison fell in less than 6 hours. We've already lost half the system." Harper felt his stomach churn. Drox Prime had been a major ally in the war, their warriors stalwart and loyal. But the planet was a vital strategic point for the Exilog, and their hive mind had launched a brutal, coordinated attack. Earth had sent reinforcements, but even now the galaxy was questioning the ethics of humanity's strategy. The war had become a grinding, unforgiving beast, and it was threatening to swallow every ideal they'd fought for. The communication link flickered, and suddenly Admiral Nathan Cross appeared on the screen. His face was a study in exhaustion, the lines of weariness etched deeply into his features. "Captain Harper," Cross began, his tone flat, "the Kaldar are pulling out of the front lines. They say they won't continue unless we change our tactics. Less violence, more negotiation." Harper closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing on him. "Not now, Admiral," he replied through gritted teeth. "We don't have the luxury of negotiation. We fight. We finish this." But even as he said it, Harper knew there was no turning back now. Humanity had crossed a line. The war had made them hard, ruthless, and perhaps that was the only way to win. But every victory was stained with blood, and with every win, they lost more of the soul they'd once hoped to preserve. It was a fight for survival, and humanity had learned the brutal truth. In this galaxy, there was no place for the weak. There was only the strong. And now, they were the strong. The destruction was total. Harper stood on the bridge of the Aegis, watching as the final wave of the Hylok forces retreated. Their homeworld, once teeming with life, now lay in ruins, its surface scorched and cracked from humanity's final assault. The Prometheus, Earth's warship of unimaginable firepower, had dropped the final strike. A planetary bombardment so devastating that the Exilok hive mind had shattered, their collective consciousness left in disarray. The war was over. The Exilok had been driven from the galaxy. But the cost of victory weighed heavily on Harper's heart. The victory had been hard won. Humanity's alliance with the Vrok had been fraught with tension, and their demands for control of future galactic operations had put the Koran and Kaldar on edge. The Elysians and the other pacifist races had condemned humanity's ruthless tactics, and there was talk of sanctions against Earth's leadership. Even now, as Harper looked out at the battle-worn fleet, he could hear the whispers of distrust echoing in the council chambers. "Captain," Lieutenant Mitchell's voice cut through his thoughts. Incoming transmission from the council. Harper took a deep breath, bracing himself for the inevitable. He wasn't sure if they would offer congratulations or condemnations. He was about to find out. The holographic image of Shara flickered into view. The Elysian ambassador's face was stern, her voice cold. "Captain Harper, the destruction of the Exilok homeworld is unsettling. The galaxy may never forgive humanity for this. You've made enemies, not just of the Exilok, but of those who still believe peace can be achieved through diplomacy." Harper's hand clenched into a fist, his nails biting into his palm. "We didn't have a choice. We acted to survive, and now the galaxy is safer. The Exilok are gone." Shara's eyes narrowed. "At what cost? You've fractured any hope for peace in this galaxy, Captain. Now you must live with the consequences." The transmission cut off, and Harper felt the weight of her words sink in. What had they become? Sinclair's voice broke the silence, low and measured. "You did what you had to, Jason. You did what we all knew needed to be done." But even as he said it, Harper wasn't sure. Was this really survival? Or had humanity just condemned itself to a future of endless conflict? The galaxy was changing, and so too was humanity. The line between redemption and ruin was thinner than ever. The corridors of the newly reformed Galactic Council were quieter than Harper had ever seen them. The hum of conversation, the buzz of diplomacy, had fallen silent in the wake of the war. The Aegis had returned to Earth, its mission complete, but it was clear that victory had come with a heavy price. Humanity had broken the old paradigm. The dream of a peaceful galaxy, built on alliances and negotiation, had splintered under the weight of a brutal reality. But now, with the Psylocke threat eradicated, the galaxy needed something else. Order. And humanity, for all its faults and failures, was the one species that understood the price of survival. Harper stood before the Council's long, polished table. Around him sat the leaders of the galaxy's most powerful species, the Vrock, the Koran, the Zaurith, and the fractured remnants of the Kaldar and Elysians. None of them looked particularly pleased to see him, but none of them dared to openly challenge the new order either. The truth was, humanity had survived the war, and now it had power. The galaxy wasn't going to forget that any time soon. "I know many of you doubt humanity's place in this galaxy," Harper began, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of everything that had happened. "You've seen the destruction we've wrought, the lives lost, and the lines we've crossed. But we've also shown you something else. The will to fight for the future, the will to survive. We faced down extinction, and we're here to lead." The silence that followed was thick with tension. The Elysians still looked uncomfortable with the idea, their peaceful ideals shattered. But others, like the Vrock, nodded with quiet approval. The Koran and Zaurith were pragmatic. They knew strength when they saw it. "We're not here to rule," Harper continued. "We're here to rebuild. To make sure something like the Psylocke can never happen again. And if that means taking up arms to defend this galaxy, then so be it. We'll fight for peace in a way that makes it last, by ensuring our enemies never get the chance to rise again." Sinclair, standing at the back of the chamber, met Harper's gaze. There were no words between them, but the look said everything. Humanity had changed. They had been tested, broken, and forged anew. The galaxy had changed too. The dream of peace might not be dead, but it had evolved into something different. And humanity was ready to lead it into that future, one battle at a time.